The lords and small folk across Westeros celebrated when King Baelor at last seated himself on the Iron Throne, and his reign began in earnest after his perilous trip to Dorne, rescue of his cousin Aemon from captivity, and his recovery from the injuries sustained in the process. Few at this time could have foreseen the kind of king Baelor would become over the next 10 years, and the impact he would have on Westeros and House Targaryen. Baelor's interests were not of the trivial matters of ruling. Instead, it remained firmly on the Seven and his devout faith. Of course, this pleased the likes of the High Septon of the faith, but not so much his hand, Prince Viserys, or the entirety of the Small Council. The first of his new edicts Baelor made must have caused consternation among those who had been used to Aegon III's sober rule, King Daeron's benign neglect of his wider role as king, and Prince Viserys's shrewd stewardship as Hand of the King. Having been married in 160 AC to the eldest of his younger sisters, Dana, the king proceeded to convince the High Septon to dissolve the marriage, a very uncommon request, and something not easily done. His argument was it had been contracted before he was king, and that the marriage had never actually been consummated, with the king supposedly providing proof of this. After the union between King Baelor and the short-lived Queen Dana was dissolved by His High Holiness, the High Septon, Baelor went further than anyone predicted he would, by placing Dana and his other two younger sisters, Rhaena and Alayna, into their own secluded Court of Beauty within the Red Keep, in what became known in the history books, and to the common folk as the Maiden Vault. The king announced that he wished to preserve their innocence from the wickedness of the world and the lusts of imperious men, but the most popular theory as to why Baelor took such drastic action was Baelor himself feared the temptation of his sister's beauty so much so it would distract him from his true purpose of serving the faith. Though the hand of the king, Prince Viserys, the three princesses themselves, and other members of the court protested, including the whole small council, but the deed was done, and the will of the king was the will of the king, and could not be stopped. And so, the princesses were hidden away in the heart of the Red Keep, accompanied only by maidens that lords and knights from across Westeros sent to the Red Keep to curry favour with the pious King Baelor. Even more protests came soon after, when Baelor announced yet another hugely unpopular edict. Again, one that not a single person could sway him from. King Baelor wanted to outlaw prostitution within King's Landing, and no one could impress on him how much trouble that would cause, not only with his small folk, but the rich businessmen of the city, and of course the many important men at court who frequented such women. More than 1,000 whores and their children, it is said, were rounded up and put out of the city into the countryside surrounding it. Many, even within the faith whom supported the outlawing of prostitution, felt that Baelor's handling of the women and children, condemning so many of them to die slow hungry death by removing them from the city, was unnecessary and a step too far. The unrest that followed in the weeks and months after was something King Baelor chose not to acknowledge as he busied himself with his newest project, a Great Sept, which would be built on the top of Asenya's hill, a sept that he said he had seen in a vision. So was the Great Sept first envisioned, though it would not be completed until many years after Baelor's death. Ultimately, some have wondered if the king's near death in Dorne from numerous viper bites had not affected his mind in some way. He was after all in a coma for several days and near death for many weeks. As the years of his reign slowly progressed, his decisions grew even more zealous and erratic, despite the efforts of Prince Viserys to control the more zealous of his edicts. But despite the outlawing of prostitution, the small folk did indeed come to love him, as the blessed king emptied the treasuries regularly to fund his charitable acts, including the year when he donated a loaf of bread daily to every man and woman in the city. The lords of the realm were beginning to grow uneasy at the edicts of Baelor and the sheer cost of them to the realm. The king had not only ended his marriage to Dana, but he had made sure he would never wed again by taking a septon's vow, aided and abetted by a high septon who was becoming increasingly influential in the kingdom. Many felt it was not Baelor ruling the kingdom, but really the High Septon, the king's edicts becoming more and more concerned with spiritual matters at the expense of material, as well as including his efforts to require those in the citadel to use doves, not ravens, to carry their messages, and his attempts to prove exemptions from taxation for those who ensured the virtue of their daughters through the use of chastity belts. But even so, for many, the Septon's vow was the most dangerous part. Without Baelor marrying and fathering children, the issue of the succession came into question, as he would therefore father no heirs. So even long before Baelor's death, there was discussions of who would take the crown once the king had perished. The most obvious answer of whom would be Baelor's heir was his hand, Prince Viserys, the younger brother of the late King Aegon III. Failing that, the crown would in theory pass to Viserys' eldest son, Prince Aegon. Little could anyone at the time have predicted the consequences on House Targaryen of Baelor not having an heir of his own, and the crown eventually passing to Viserys and later his cousin Aegon. One unfortunate aspect of Baelor's zealotry was his insistence on burning books. Though most books might hold little that is worth knowing, and some might even hold matters that are dangerous, destroying knowledge is a painful thing regardless. That Baelor had the former courtful mushrooms testimony of the events of the Dance of the Dragons burned is no great surprise, given the rabid and scandalous content within, but certain Bath's unnatural history. However mistaken some of Bath's conclusions, it was work of one of the brightest minds of the Seven Kingdoms ever saw. Bath's study and alleged practices of higher arts proved enough to win Baelor's enmity and the destruction of his work, even though the unnatural history contains much that is neither controversial nor wicked. It is only fortunate for us that fragments have survived today, so that the lore within was not wholly lost. There is still some hope. There are copies of the full book in the libraries of the Lords of Westeros, or even in the Far East in Essos.